This week on Brummeets World.
I know that none of this was written with consent and none of this was approached to try to handle the conversation of weight carefully. Instead, it was just like, let's make fat jokes for 20 minutes. So.
And I just also find it highly disrespectful to two of the leading stars of this show. They've dedicated 7 years to this. I mean, Danielle in, Pod Meets World has already said by season 7, she was kind of out of it. They were all kind of burnt out by the end. And so to get to this final, the final few episodes of the series and to kind of smack them in the face like this feels incredibly disrespectful to me.
When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bro Meets World.
When it's Bro Meets World.
Your Boy Meets World fan cast. I'm Ceej.
And I am Tony Curtis.
Tony.
Yo.
This episode, we have entered our last 7 episodes of Boy Meets World.
Ooh, first of all, yes, it's a very we're getting to the end of the road and I'm getting in my feels about it, but also I really hope this episode is not an indication of what's left for us this season.
Right.
Oh boy, I've been I knew this episode was coming up for a while and I've just kind of been rolling my eyes, and I finally watched it and I'm still rolling my eyes. So
I want everyone to know this episode will be something I'm really interested to see us talk about.
Yeah.
Because for those of you who don't know, Tony and I are two black men, Tony's biracial, who have grown up with body issues kind of their entire lives, I want to say.
We grew up Jumbo Jack.
Yeah, exactly. So to hear or watch this episode and see how it treated people back then, the fact that it is still on streaming, the fact that we haven't really come that much further in terms of conversation of police and people's bodies. I'm really, really interested to talk about this episode and just see where it goes. That's what I'll say.
That's a good way to start.
As you said, I also remember watching this episode. I remember this episode stuck with me, and it is one of the episodes whenever people were talking about season 7 that I was like, we're going to get to that. And then also it's an episode that the Pod Meets Worldcast has spoken and referred to numerous times as well. So we know that they are going to have some words.
I have to imagine this show made a lasting impression on them as a cast. And so, this episode feels invasive. It feels offensive. There's so much. I mean, we'll obviously get to it. I don't want to go too far without doing our introduction and our housekeeping stuff, but there's just a lot about this episode that I was slack-jawed by.
Yeah, that's just the way to do it. Anyway, as we said, 7 more of these.
7 more for season 7.
For season 7. That's why I was like, oh, season 7, last 7 episodes. I figured we kind of do that. We do have some really interesting things that we are considering as we wrap up the season.
Sure.
We've been very honored to continue to speak with really fun people, really important people, but just wanted to discuss that with you guys. And speaking with you guys hit us up at brummeetsworld@gmail.com or send us your feedback on YouTube. You guys have been so fantastic. Continue to hit subscribe, because as we said, just because these are the last Boy Meets World episodes does not mean this is the last that you will be seeing of us. So
absolutely not.
Go over there, hit subscribe, follow, give us your feedback, give us your ratings. We highly appreciate you guys, and depending on when this comes out, you should also be looking forward to us on this season for recap with Pod Meets World. So we will be speaking to them again. If you guys have any questions or anything that you want us to ask them, go ahead and hit us up at brummeetsworld@gmail.com or at brummeetsworld on all the places.
I have a quick question. We have merch, do we not?
I've been told we do have merch. Yes.
So okay, all right, great. I just want to make sure. I heard some rumblings through the grapevine. I just, I heard it from the produce lady at the grocery store.
But you got to update her on the type of merch that we have going.
We have links for everything. Check our show descriptions. You can find out where you can get our merch, find our Patreon info, all that jazz you can find in the description.
All right, let's get into it. All right. That means you have to give me to tell me about it.
All right. I'll do my best. Tell us about it. The show fat shames the cast. Plays up a confusion for the sake of cheap laughs, while body shaming Topanga. Also, Shawn has no ass.
I did find that interesting. I was like, when like who wrote in like writers like I have no ass, and it's just like it's a funny bit, but also what are we saying? What are we doing? Like I don't know. I feel like we'll get into it.
Yes.
There's so much. Okay, for those of you who don't know, this is season 7, episode 17. She's having my baby back ribs. When Topanga feels insecure about her body, she and Eric secretly agree to go on a diet, leading Cory to mistakenly believe Topanga is pregnant. Cory confides in his family and friends, but when it's revealed Topanga isn't pregnant, the group opens up about their own insecurities, and Cory and Topanga embrace the idea of starting a family when they're ready. Some notes that I wanted to go. One is I was not expecting it, but this episode was written by women. It was written by writing duo Patricia Carr and Laura Runnels. They are the writing pair that are often referred to in the writer's room. And yeah, knowing that, I looked at this and I was like, okay, I can see where this episode tried to do it right. I still feel like this episode should not exist.
Well,
but,
and like, not to name anyone, but we've had conversations with one or two writers where they were basically like, hey, Michael came in and was like, they're getting too fat. We need to make an episode about it.
Yeah.
And it like, that's what I mean when I'm saying the show is fat shaming its own cast, because there were specific conversations like, we think that Will and Danielle are getting too big. We need to make them do something about it. So we're going to bully them into it with this episode, essentially. And that's where a lot of my beef comes from.
Absolutely. And then also, like, I will say, I've been looking and reading a lot of content of like, different shows and how they discuss their cast and like, things that either didn't age well or like society feels differently about. Like, for example, I've been rewatching Charmed, and a lot of people were talking about like the Charmed clothing and like what they wore and how it would be like too skimpy now, but someone was like that was actually revolutionary at the time. So there is something to be said about context. However, this episode, when you know that it's not only did like it feel a certain way as a child who was a bigger child, but to know all of these years later that they didn't consult the cast, that they just wrote it and then had them perform it. And it does feel the utmost of a shaming episode. And that's kind of like why I watched it a little bit differently, because I'm like, I know that none of this was written with consent, and none of this was approached to try to handle the conversation of weight carefully. Instead, it was just like, let's make fat jokes for 20 minutes. So
and I just also find it highly disrespectful to two of the like leading stars of this show. They've dedicated 7 years to this. I mean, Danielle in, Pod Meets World has already said by like season 7, she was kind of like out of it. Like they were all kind of burnt out by the end. And so to get to this like final, like, the final few episodes of the series, and to kind of smack them in the face like this feels incredibly disrespectful to me. Like I again, we'll have to talk to them about it when we get to this part of the series with them. But I felt like it was embarrassing for Topanga and therefore probably embarrassing for Danielle. I don't want to assume anything, but I have to imagine that Will probably felt similar as well. I can't imagine having an entire show written about your body and the changes your body is going through during a time when, you're on television, you're on magazines, you're overly exposed already, and now you have to get like critique for your body on national television just feels super shady to me. I don't know. It's really hard for me to like. I'll say this: there's parts of this episode that are funny.
Yeah.
There's things about this episode that I'm like, wow, if it wasn't about this subject line, I could
Yeah.
get on board with like the confusion and the fun of it all.
Yep.
But it was really hard for me to overlook like the core of the episode, which is just like, hey, aren't these two getting big? Which I don't even agree with personally. So
Correct. I mean, that's another thing that we have to start to talk about. For those of you who remember a few episodes, I talked about the fact that I realized they were starting to write Eric like he was the fat friend.
Yep.
They were starting to write Eric like he was Chris Farley, or Seth, not even Seth Rogen, because Seth Rogen actually like is able to like reclaim that narrative, and he's kind of like the dad bod archetype. That's when we start to change and embrace this kind of thing. But
even so, Seth writes all of his shit. So everything that's in there is stuff that is self-deprecating. He has consent to it coming out there and like exposing his body that way.
Correct. This is saying that Will Friedle at this time is a whale. And like it is obvious that he's gained weight since he was a child. But he hasn't gained that much weight to where I feel like we need a whole episode. And if the episode was like dedicated to them actually working out and actually feeling, like they were, or showing them like being in-laws, brother and sister in-laws, and like relying on each other, developing their relationship. I think that'd be great. But instead, it literally is just like fat people love food, fat people can't help but to have weight. And that's why, like, don't get me wrong, we'll get to the fun stuff. And I'm just gonna say, I'm not going to apologize. I usually am like, I'm so sorry, but this episode hit very close to home, so I'm gonna watch it with a very specific eye.
And like you, and this is something we've been saying for a while, like I want to see Topanga and Eric form a bond. I want to see them play together. I want to see them be silly and have adventures. But like this just feels like the worst way to get these two together. And so it's hard for me to have fun with it, honestly, because I have to imagine that like they had to put a lot of their own self aside in order to just perform and just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this as Eric or as Topanga. But I don't know. It feels deeply personal to them as actors.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to speak for like the child who also may not be the smallest in their friend group, like I will say this episode does open up with a pretty interesting thing. One, this is where I think everyone was talking about like Jack just being kind of like a tool, because this episode opens up in a way where Matthew Lawrence should very proudly be showing off his body. He's very proud of his body and the progress he has, but it also
6% body fat.
It doesn't feel natural. It feels kind of forced. It feels kind of like something that they're showing to set up the story that they want to tell. And that to me is kind of like where we start off on the wrong foot, because like we watch it and I'm just like, oh, I can already tell that we need Jack's body to hold up against Topanga and Eric's body.
And to the point of like this deeply influences like the perception of Jack, like I feel like knowing this episode was coming up, I've been kind of like keeping an eye on like the douche evolution, the douche solution of Jack Hunter. Because like it started with like, wow, the hair starting to get spikier. Wow, he's starting to get a little bit more egocentric. We saw in like the War and Peace episode how he was like in the future kind of presented as being just like a dick, a finance bro dick. And so to come back and to see him talking about his 6% body fat, I'm like, one, who is this Jack? And two, why, like, I understand why he's doing it for the sake of this episode, but I also think it kind of takes away from all the good things they've built about Jack Hunter over the years by making him this vain, this surface level, that him, Rachel, and Angela, who I don't even know why Angela's feeling up on her brother, or her boyfriend's brother's abs, but like it all just feels very weird to me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's funny because as you said, like they have like everyone's behavior doesn't feel natural to their characters.
Mhm.
And to your point, I find it interesting because I watched this and I was like, this is a version of Jack that I think everyone remembers.
Yeah.
It is this version of Jack is in everyone's mind. However, we've watched episode after episode, and this is not Jack's character. Like, don't get me wrong, the idea that Jack is secretly insecure, or the fact that Jack would put like his entire personality into his body, it makes sense. And I think the fact that it does make sense, or that we want that stereotype to be true for someone who looks like Matthew Lawrence,
Yeah.
that it makes sense. However, we didn't build to this point. We really just kind of appeared here. Like,
And-
he's never been a gym bro. If we would have seen him really show off his body and his workout routine when Angela's dad came earlier in the season.
Yeah.
If we would have seen him like during Rachel's dinner party being like, remember, I can only eat protein, or like all this other stuff,
Yeah.
like that would have been something. But we've never seen him be this way, this blatant, until this episode. And it's funny because this episode kind of defines his character for others, even though, as you said, he has other personality qualities.
Well, I will say this, that I do feel like the show has had no idea what the fuck to do with Jack Hunter from the get. And I feel like they could have made him almost like Rob Lowe in Parks and Rec. Like, they could have made it a fun thing for him. Like, oh, this is just what I'm about all the time. And even like, oh, Eric, come on, let's work out together or whatever. Like, they could have made this to the point where we knew that health was really important to him, but he wasn't an asshole about it. And now just to be introduced to it in this way feels like he is more so showing off than he does actually care about his body. Or even like later on when we find out that like he's doing it to overcompensate for something, like give us something to lead to that. Like, why are we just finding out about that now? I also want to say that coming from the future, like multiverse episode, it feels like the hunters are the hunters from the future, because we come back, Shawn still has his future goatee, they let him keep it. So like there was things about this episode that I was like, did peace play a part? Are we in a new timeline? Like, what's happening?
That's
here?
a good theory, that like we went to that peace future, and now every episode is just like in that timeline.
Because Jack, Rachel, and Angela are grouped together just like they were during the split, and they're all arguing over who's the most beautiful amongst them. And I was just like, is this the kind of like they're still bitter about the fight and the war thing? Like, is this them kind of throwing it in their faces? I don't know what's happening.
It's so funny when we think about like that pivot point and the idea of like we're all used to the multiverse and like canon events and all this other stuff, but like it is crazy to think that like maybe in this world we're just in a completely different timeline, because just in general, this Jack does not make sense.
Yeah.
Like, let's think about other TV shows to where we find out a character who's really and traditionally good looking, used to be bigger when they were younger. Schmidt,
Monica Geller.
Monica on Friends. I think of Kyle Barker on Living Single.
Oh yeah.
These are all characters who are really good looking individuals. However, we learned when they were younger, they were really big. But the thing is, all of them have characteristics that them being big, you go, that explains everything we already know about you.
100%.
It explains your behavior. It explains your neuroticism. It explains your vanity. It explains like all of these things. Like, we already know who you are. And then that is explained by the fact that we learned that you used to be bigger. In this episode, it tries to do all of that, both character development and explanation, in one episode. And you're like, but you never showed any of these tendencies before.
And again, I think as an audience, we're supposed to just pick up like, oh, Jack's attractive, so behind the scenes, while all this other stuff's been happening this season, this is just who he is. But they can do that because they haven't developed him as a character enough, where him and Rachel can just be whatever they need them to be in any episode, because they don't have a firm definition of who those characters are.
Absolutely. Okay, so also, like, I was looking at this being like, why are they not preparing to go to the gym? Like, I watched this episode and I was like, this is a great conversation to have if you were going to the gym or coming back from the gym. The fact that you guys are just in the student union having this conversation feels weird. I don't know about you, and I'm not saying that this didn't happen, but I don't remember a lot of my friends just sitting around in public talking about how good their bodies are. And that's from someone who lived in New York and LA.
Yeah. It really kind of I don't know. I feel like with Angela and Rachel specifically, like towards the end, they try to make us empathize with them a little bit by hearing that they also have insecurities with their bodies. But it just feels like that moment in Mean Girls where they're just like, oh, I hate this and they'll hate that. And they look at Caddy and they're like, well, what do you hate about yourself? Like, it just feels like a thing that girls say as like an auto response versus like it being true to who they are as characters.
Correct. And then, so talking about being true as characters, we've already talked about kind of like the depersonalization, I'll say, of Topanga's character and who she used to be versus who she is now. Because I looked at this and I was like, if anyone should have been body positive, if anyone, and I'm not saying that Topanga should be Superwoman and not have insecurities and not want people to, not want to feel beautiful or anything like that. I'm saying if anyone I expected to be like ahead of the curve on the body positivity, it would be early seasons Topanga.
The Topanga who, when asked, are you going to shave your armpits when you grow up? And she said, I haven't decided yet. Like, she does not have this. And it's interesting because we kind of explored this already when she got her hair cut and they tried to make her vain. And she's like, no, actually, this isn't who I am. So it just feels like we've had that development and it's like 2 steps forward, 5 steps back in this. And I also think that just by showing Jack, Eric, and Rachel, I'm sorry, Jack, Angela, and Rachel just talking about how beautiful they are while Topanga's literally eating pizza is so like, again, like they're painting her to be this person that she's not. She is not the fat friend. And I just hate this whole stereotype that like people who are chubby are constantly seeking out food or like obsessed with food and can't see food without freaking out by it. It's just like, it's such a low-hanging fruit of jokes. And I want more for characters that we've come to love over the course of 7 years.
Not that I ever expected them to do this, but it would have been a really great time to like open up that there are different reasons that people gain weight.
Yeah.
Like the idea that some people, like maybe it was Topanga's birth control. We know she fucking now.
Yeah.
So why not just be like,
we know she's on birth control.
Yeah. And that's having a reaction to my body. Or your metabolism changes when you get older. The stress of college. Like, there's so much that goes into it. And instead, it's just like, no, they like food. They like pizza. And that's the reason why they are big. And then it gives us a roundabout way of saying that's okay after spending so long saying dieting is embarrassing.
Something else I just want to point out is the use of the word fat. Not to say anything like, I mean, fat's a word. You can call yourself fat. You can call other people fat. But when I look at Will Friedle and Danielle Fishel in this episode, the word fat doesn't even cross my mind. You could say curvy, you could say chubby maybe, but to say fat and for like Topanga to be like, am I fat? Oh, I'm fat. Like she just says a bunch of times in this episode. And not only do I feel like that's kind of hurtful for Topanga and Danielle, but for the women who are larger than Danielle, to see Topanga having this crisis over not being able to fit into like her husband's pants, like it's fat shaming on a larger level than just really these two characters.
Correct. And I think that like this episode is what this podcast was made for. It just is. It's a way of like dissecting and reflecting on, this was a great episode that taught a lot of really good lessons. You guys hold on to your seats. I'm going to say something that most of you wouldn't have expected. Cory handles this situation way better than would be expected.
The one upside is I think I like Cory better in this episode than I do in every episode in the last 2 seasons.
There are a few things that he does that I'm like, of course we're going to do that. And there is no comedy, there's no show without that. However, Cory is supportive. Cory is shown to love Topanga for who she is and think that Topanga literally drives him crazy
Yeah, I
in
love that
general.
scene when Topanga and Eric are kind of like talking about themselves being too big in the student union. And then we cut to Cory, who's just talking to Shawn. Isn't she so perfect? Isn't she so beautiful? Ain't I so lucky? Like, he is just so in love with her as she is. And I felt like that was really important to show like the contrast over like how you see yourself versus how the people who love you see you. Like, I thought Cory was done well in this episode.
Yes, so as many faults as it has, this episode does have some really good points and some things that we can learn from, but it also spends so much time just being like, hey, Topanga and Eric are fat. And that fat, like the joke is that Eric is can't button your pants fat.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's like can't button your pants fat, can't sit comfortably fat. Like they did everything short of giving him an inhaler so he could
Yeah.
breathe properly.
And also, like, when I was talking before about how I really want to see a bond form between Eric and Topanga, all the work that they do at the beginning of the show to be like, hey, this is going to be us buddying up on this, they kind of go back on later in the episode where Eric's like, no, I think you're hot. I just told you were fat so I could eat your pizza. It's like, oh, wow. So there was nothing genuine about this connection that you guys have been building in this episode. Eric is just so fat, he can't control himself around people's food and has to project that onto other people so that he can eat more. It
Yes.
really was like, what is going on here?
And to that point, it kind of redeems Danielle and it says, Danielle, don't worry. You're not really that fat. Topanga's not really that fat because she has a man that loves her just the way that she is. Will, Eric, you're still fat though.
Yeah, and like that's the thing, like as much as it tries to save the story by saying like, oh, Cory loves you just how you are, so that's all that matters. It's like, no, the story should be I Topanga love myself for who I am, or grows to like have some kind of self-love or self-acceptance, but it's the like opinions of outsiders, other people, her husband, that gives her the validation. It's like it's still outside validation when the episode should have been about her finding inner validation for herself, and we never get there.
Absolutely. And again, like I think it's like for those of you who are like you're reading too much into this, it's like no, like I don't think you understand as a bigger person, the person who's always been bigger both in height and in weight than all of my friends. This kind of storytelling sticks with you.
Yeah.
It really does. That being said, I will not deny that I do love the pairing of Danielle and Will. We don't really get to see their characters interact very often. I do feel like Danielle is really getting to have some fun and act without Cory.
Sure.
So I just thought that was I do like that this episode allows them to have a good time and explore. I'm just upset that it's during this storyline.
I also, there was things where I wondered and I was like, did the script say Eric eats a piece of pizza in one bite, or was that just Will just being like, oh, I can up this up a little bit? Because
I
there's
will
a part
say,
of me who feels like Will's like probably has some feelings about this, but also is just like, well, I'm the funny guy, so I'll just play it up for laughs.
yeah, no, I wrote in my notes that as much as I have a lot of problem with this, the whole pizza in the mouth was funny.
Yeah.
I really did laugh, and I was like, that is talent. Like the ability to do that and kind of play it up and just kind of like roll with it. I was like, it is a talent. It does kind of reinforce this idea that fat people don't have self-control,
Yeah.
but kudos to Will for pulling it off.
I want to talk about this next scene where Topanga and Cory are in bed, and Topanga is just like asking Cory for reassurance. And I will say, Cory freely provides it to her,
Yeah,
and offers her pancakes. Like,
yeah.
he's like, this isn't an issue. Do you want some pancakes? Do you want some sex? Girl, what can I do for you?
I'm laughing because the idea of later on when Shawn, I will give it the credit. Shawn makes the assumption of, hey, how would you feel if these pancakes got together and made a little pancake? And Cory's like, I hear what you're saying. You want more butter.
And it even comes back later when Cory's like, what do I do? And Eric's like, your pancakes and butter did this to her. I was just like, they're having a lot of fun. That's the thing. Like, this episode is, for a sitcom, is kind of written well. Like, they have the butter thing come up. The whole thing with Cory just being like, she stole my pants, I want my pants back. Funny. Like, I had a good time with that too. Like, I don't know. There was things about this where I was just like, wow, if the subject was a little bit differently, I could really be on board with this episode.
Absolutely. You know what? Honestly, if it was just Topanga had a pregnancy scare, or they thought Topanga was pregnant, for different reasons. Now, again, it's interesting because they didn't go into like the trope of Topanga's like having mood swings and all this other stuff, so therefore she must be pregnant. But I did go, a woman's body is changing, so she must be pregnant. It's not a storyline we want to reinforce either. There's another way to tell the story. There can be 100 million reasons that you think Topanga is pregnant, but we don't need it to be because she's gotten bigger.
And I do like when Cory is in bed with Shawn, which I love the two of them in bed together. Cory's like, oh, something's up with Topanga. She's tired. She had no appetite. She stole my pants. Like, he never says to Shawn, like, oh, she's getting bigger. Like, that's never anything that Cory puts onto her. It's all of kind of Topanga's inner insecurities that are making that known, and kind of other people's opinions, but never Cory. He always sees her as beautiful.
And then also the scene with Cory and Shawn is interesting because we get to have a whole bunch of conversations that I was like, I can't believe we're doing this. It's like, are you guys using protection? Did you use and was she on the and you know,
did you try the which, by the way, did you try the is Shawn doing like this, like it's pulling out? So
yeah, no, absolutely.
He's like, yeah, we wore a condom, she's on birth control, I pulled out, I don't even know if we had sex.
Again, that's another thing where it works and it's really good, and the commitment from the actors sell it. And we are having such a really interesting conversation. But I also feel like the episode can't quite stick with its opinion on what we're doing.
Yeah.
I say that because Cory immediately goes, my life is over. I already resent this kid.
And that's going to cost therapy that I can't afford.
And it's insane because I love that we're having this conversation that like he's like, I already resent this kid. But let's talk about that more. Let's explore these feelings more, like what that means and why people don't want to get pregnant at that age. But then we really stick with it, and then he has to tell his parents, and because his parents feel a certain way, then he like doubles down on his decision to do so, and then he learns to embrace the idea, and it's like all of these things are happening when at the end of this scene, Shawn says the only correct thing in this episode that we get from these two, which is talk to your wife.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, this whole thing could have been settled with one conversation, but because they refused to have Cory actually talk to Topanga openly or with details like a normal husband would talk to his wife, like it ends up snowballing out of control, where it was just like, ask the question. Just be like, hey, are you pregnant? Just ask her. Why are we doing?
Here's the thing. As much as I would love to be on your side, I can't say that the most average normal guy would do this. They're stupid.
This is true. This is true.
And even though the obvious thing is to talk to the person you think is pregnant first before you go around telling other people that she is, there are so many stories on the internet with men who have done a lot or equally as dumb shit without actually talking to their partner. So
my favorite story of this is when NASA sent a woman in space for 6 days with 100 tampons and asked her if that would be enough.
This is NASA. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
how much can we expect from Cory and Shawn?
I do like what you said where you were like, hey, this whole thing could have worked if it was just a pregnancy scare, where Topanga was like, hey, I'm thinking this might happen, don't tell anyone. And you could have had the whole episode be kind of the same.
Correct. Absolutely. If it would have been that, if you would have either had like a mix up where, you know, someone, like we kind of do it in Friends a little bit later where it's like it's a mistaken pregnancy test. But if Topanga actually did be like, hey, I kind of missed and does that mean maybe? And we do like the same little comedic bit. We could have done that if we want to have this conversation and
Yeah.
we want to have everything be the same without focusing on Will and Danielle's bodies. Like that is where I'm coming from.
Because like you have this kind of like fun scene with Cory and Shawn that I think actually kind of works, but then immediately we cut back to Eric and Topanga in the student union 12 hours into their diet, and they can't smell a Danish. They can't look at people eating anything without losing their mind. And I'm like, first of all, do Danishes have a smell? They're not warm.
So here's the thing. As much as I will go in on this episode for all of its wrong things, this scene is funny. It's just objectively funny. The way that Danielle is just acting. There's Danish in this room. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I laughed repeatedly because I know that feeling when you are hungry or when there's something that you want and you're like, I know it. Like, so like, is that pie? Like,
Yeah.
but like the idea of them already, like your senses are heightened and all this other stuff, it's funny. I enjoy it. I just wish it wasn't around this subject. If we gave Danielle this scene and it wasn't about her body and it was in a different place,
Yeah.
I would love this for her. If we gave her another reason to show her comedic chops, I would love this for her because it's good.
I also think that you could have like inserted Jack in a way that was helpful. Just been like to Topanga and Eric are kind of talking about their bodies, and maybe Jack comes over and gives them reassurance, but says like, "Hey, if you want a little help, I don't mind like being a coach or helping you along, like something like that to get him more involved." Because it seems like he would be a great person to kind of like restrict them as they're having these urges and having like you could have played that up a little bit without making it so much about their bodies, just like we want to be healthier.
Absolutely. And you know what? That also is a different way of approaching it. If Eric and Topanga had gone to Jack and been like, "Hey, we want to work out with you. We want to do these things because we have noticed that we're a little bit bigger and we want to do these things. And we just feel like it's college and we want to keep up and yada, yada, and so on and so forth." If that's how we would have approached it, and Jack is helping them, and now you have like half of the group is keeping the secret and the other half doesn't know what's going on, and that creates a suspicious behavior, and then you get more of like this comedy of errors. I would like that, even because now you're showing that they're trying to do it, you're showing Jack actually be like his experience is relevant, he's not just used for eye candy.
Yeah.
And this is someone where it's like we're approaching it from all different angles, not just these two are fat and they have no self-control.
One other thing I want to say about this scene when they're like in the student union together, kind of talking about the Danish, is Topanga says to Eric, "I want to be as slender as the day Cory met me." And Eric jokingly says, "You when you were 2 years old." But I think that would have been a great opportunity to kind of say like, "Hey, bodies change as you grow up. You can't compare yourself to who you were when you were a child." And I think that like even now, like a lot of people are like, "Oh man, I wish I had the body I had when I was in high school or whatever," where it's like, no, you're 40 years old now. You have the body of a 40-year-old. Like it's different. Like I just wish there could have been more emphasis on that.
I'm thinking about Eric's line, "Women reject me for who I am, not what I look like." Again, there are sometimes like this episode is it's hard to discuss because as many things that are like, nope, why are we doing this? It also has some lines where you're like, okay, they pulled it off. And I want to just give them applause because I don't know if I could pull this off if I was that insecure about my own body and what was going
Sure,
on.
yeah.
The fact that they own this, and we, as you said, we know that they were blindsided by it, but that both Danielle and Will are committed and they bring in the comedy and they sell their storylines this week. I just want to applaud them because it's actually really good work when you consider that this is really personal things.
And also, like I said, I don't appreciate everything, but there are moments of this episode where I'm like, this is actually really great sitcom writing. One that I want to point out is Cory sees that Topanga and Eric are talking, and then Cory's like, "What's going on? Tell me what you know," basically. And they have this back and forth where Eric's like, "Hey, me and her have similar appetites," and then Cory's like, "You've been through situations like this before?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, on and off since high school." Do mom and dad know? Yeah, they know. Dad actually thinks it's kind of funny. I was like, this is great sitcom writing. I
Yes.
don't like the situation, but this comedy from this situation is sometimes very on point.
Very much so. And again, we're kind of talking about like something else that we're doing that this show very rarely does is we are giving Eric a history and a past of being sexually active.
Yeah.
And this idea of like, it's believable to Cory that not only has Eric found himself in this position, but multiple times, and his parents would know about it. And like, that is believable. And I think that that's great because, again, we haven't seen Eric pull anyone lately, but it is funny and they do a great job of selling that comedy of errors, misunderstanding, and it's just a fun scene.
I also think that so two things I want to say. First of all, Ben and Will are clearly having so much fun together in this scene. And one thing I really appreciate is when Cory is kind of freaking out, like, "Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened." Eric's like, "This isn't about you. What about Topanga?" And I kind of appreciate him because that's us the entire time. We're like, "What about Topanga?" Like, advocate for the woman in this. And Eric kind of does that. He's kind of a good brother-in-law in this episode without, if you take away him fat shaming her for the sake of having her pizza, like he does kind of advocate for her throughout the episode in ways that I thought were important.
Absolutely. And this is like the Eric that we love.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Eric that we feel is worthy of respect. And I want more for his character and for Danielle's character because it's like, if you guys are able to do this in such a bad situation, why can't we do this every episode in different situations?
That was something I took away. I was like, wow, when they want to, they can pull out like the comedy, but like it's so hit or miss in season 7. And even throughout this episode, there's some parts where I'm like, wow, that was really good, and other parts where I'm just like, wow, that's so tone deaf. I can't believe it was allowed in the episode.
Absolutely. So when we continue on, this is when Cory runs out. He tells Shawn that what they talked about is actually happening. And then Shawn tells Angela, and then we get the beginning of this game of telephone.
Which, by the way, my favorite thing was Angela telling Rachel, and then Rachel going, "Oh, so that's why they got married." Love that. Love that Rachel's just like, yeah, it's super weird for these children to be getting married, right? Oh, they must have gotten pregnant. That makes more sense.
Absolutely. Then we get Jack telling this stranger, and he's just like, "Who's Cory and Topanga?"
Yeah, he's like a billionaire's offering to buy their baby, and he's like, "I don't know who these people are."
And again, we get the game of television. It's
Telephone.
also oh yeah, sorry. We get the game of telephone, and it's also interesting because so we get the scene with the Matthews, and little known fact for everyone, this episode is the last time we get the full cast all in one episode.
Wow.
This is it. This is the last time we see everyone together. Again, why is it this episode?
Yeah, but that also makes me really sad because I know that the reason why is because Angela's not in the finale. So that's why this is the last one. Wow. Well, I will say, even when they get to the Matthews house, I feel like Feeney, Alan, and Amy are all like they have great chemistry too. Like I love seeing them together. Cory comes in and they're like, "Oh, we already knew." Feeney says he learned his wife, who was not seen, by the way,
mention of the dean,
heard it from a produce lady at the grocery store that they were adopting a 14-year-old Chinese boy. Like the game of telephone has gotten so out of control, but in a way where I'm just like, this is still funny. Like I'm loving that even the parents are getting in on this.
Speaking of the parents, there are two things in this scene with Alan that happens, and we're sorry. There are two things in this scene with Alan that we have to address.
100%.
One being that he says responsible couples don't have babies. And first of all, we now know according to the conversation, that Cory and Topanga did in fact do everything right, with the exception that sometimes that happens, or celibacy. Those
Yeah.
are the only two other options that they had to not get pregnant, and sometimes life finds a way.
Life finds a way. Yeah, this is very true. Alan says responsible couples don't have babies. He goes on to say, remember how difficult it was when you had Eric? Pointed like talking to Amy, and Amy's like, you mean when we had Eric? And
We
then
had financial trouble and you never got your figure back. And I
I'm
was
like,
like,
oh, so we're fat shaming Amy now too? Like, what are we
every
doing?
woman can get it. Everybody.
Amy is one of the most slender women I've ever seen on television. How is she getting shots aimed at her?
And you never got your figure back is a line that, again, I want to say, as much as I want to be angry, this line has been said to women by their husbands in their faces in front of company to this day.
I also feel like in earlier seasons, Amy was kind of like more ready to call Alan out for some shit like that.
Yeah.
Whereas now she's just like, all right, you're done now. Like, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, wait, you're gonna let him just get away with saying something like that?
You're right.
This
Early
isn't
seasons
season
Amy would
one,
have been
Amy.
like, yeah, early seasons Amy would have been like, you and I need to speak outside.
Yeah. Alan, can we talk in the next room, please, privately?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And by the way, I just said that like being hilarious, but how great would it have been to have Amy pull Alan away and say, can I speak to you in the next room?
Yeah.
Never talk about my body in that way. And like also have like a whole discussion about like what it means when a husband would say something like that. And it still ties into the theme of the episode.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Is like it would have been great to have Amy actually say something that would have like recontextualized the entire episode and say that, hey, by the way, anyone bringing up a woman's body is not just a woman. Bringing up anyone's body
Yeah.
is not something that you should be doing if you are in fact a supportive friend.
I feel like in this scene, Amy kind of represents a generation of women who were shown so much misogyny and who had the patriarchy kind of shoved down their throats so much that like just telling him you're done, like those comments were so frequent for women in that age, like growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that like it just we can't even pay attention to it. Whereas now I feel like it's like, no, we can hold men accountable at any point. Whereas, you know, that thing where it was like you hear your grandpa say something shitty to your grandma and grandma just lets it slide, and you're just like, wait a second, we should be talking about this, right? And oh, grandpa's never gonna change, that kind of thing. Like I feel like that's very represented here.
Have you seen there's a trend on TikTok where I know the audio where someone's like, okay, grandma, you
You little
victim.
victim. Yes. And it's just a bunch of stories about how people's grandpa treated their grandmas like shit and were predators and weird and violent and all kinds of things. And it was just normal and accepted. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, I'm glad our generation is having this conversation, but I mean, that kind of, like I said, adds context to why maybe Amy was so just like whatever about it.
Correct. Okay, so first of all, I want to acknowledge we do have Alan say it's okay to be a father after he says some insane things, but he also says it's okay to be a father, and Cory looks at it from a different perspective. I think that all of this is really great. I do think it would have been nice for Mr. Feeney to give them some, again, advice, but he's like, I got to go straighten the grocery woman out, not my wife.
Yeah.
Again, a very funny bit of writing, but also the dean doesn't even get mentioned by name. It's just Feeney's wife now.
Bonnie got married and
never
never seen again.
This accomplished woman who was the dean of the university before she met George is now just referred to as George's wife.
His boss is apparently like not working, and what does he have her job now? I don't even know what's going on. One thing I do want to talk about with this scene is that Eric comes in with the "you never breastfed me" line, which I do remember there being conversations about like breastfed babies versus formula-fed babies and like how that affects weight. He goes on to say like you know, at first I thought it was me. I thought it was my metabolism, but then I thought I'm no racist. And I legitimately laughed out loud. I was like, some of this comedy is on point.
Again, it makes me so upset because you're right. Not only is it funny, but I can't get it out of my head. You never breastfed me. Eric, you didn't either.
Like, Eric is funny, but of course he has to run off as soon as he hears the ice cream truck because he's so fat he can't let an opportunity for sweets go by.
It makes me angry because I'm laughing because comedically this is shot well. Comedically, this is done so good. It's a bad subject matter and it reinforces stereotypes. So it
Yeah.
should not be funny. Actually, I'll take that back. It is not funny, the stereotypes that they are reinforcing. However, the acting is great. The timing is great. And I will give credit where credit is due. The fact that you literally just mentioned that he comes in and says you never breastfed me, that he just like, I can't blame myself.
I'm not a racist.
I'm not a racist. The fact that he runs out after the ice cream man. Again, the performance, A1. I will absolutely give credit. Okay. But then I want to talk about the next scene because I watched.
Before we go there, they're like, "Oh, you should talk to the person that you love," and Cory goes, "That would be Shawn."
Yeah, just the disrespect that Topanga has put up with is
across the board.
But I was like, it is insane that no one has talked to Topanga yet.
No one.
Insane. I looked at this and I was like, Angela's not a friend.
No.
She's not a good friend. She is not a girl's girl, as we would say. Because how would you? I would not have let Topanga go near that room once I found out.
Also, for Angela not to just be like, send her a text or a call like right away, being like, "Girl,
congratulations.
Congratulations. But like, let's talk. Like, let's have this conversation. Like, I'm your best friend. Like, I should be the first person you talk to about this." Like, there's none of that. It's just like oh, you're glowing and just like believing basically everything Shawn is telling her. I was just like, oh, wow. So you're more Shawn's girlfriend than you are Topanga's friend.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they're supposed to be friends, but there is no one that I like. Honestly, it's to the level of I kind of would have preferred Amy had been the one who said all of these things because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Angela would allow her friend to walk into that room knowing that everyone thinks she's pregnant. And in fact, it's just that she had gained weight and was trying to lose it.
I'm gonna go on record and say this. We're at the last 7 episodes.
Tackled her.
I don't think Angela is Topanga's friend, really. I don't think that they're like best friends. Like, the show has tried to convince us that these two are best friends since like season 5. Show me an episode where they are legitimately like there for each other, best friend, girlfriends. I don't know that we've seen one yet.
I would have loved, this would have been a great opportunity to have Trina and Danielle show their own version of physical comedy. So, you know, like there are plenty of episodes where Cory and Shawn are like wrestling with each other, or like battling, trying to do something silly. Same thing with Will. If we would have had like Angela trying to fight Topanga off from entering the student union and Topanga being like, "What is wrong with you? Why are you refusing to let me in this room? What's behind that door?" That would have been a great comedic bit and something that we don't really get to see often. But the idea that Angela just lets her walk in, I'm like, there's like, y'all aren't friends.
Doesn't even give her a heads up being like, "Hey, there's been a misunderstanding." Nothing.
Yeah. It would like, that would have like, by the way, like if you would have been like, "Girl, I'm so sorry," you know, like all of that would have been good because I would have shown some remorse. Instead, you let her walk into a baby shower.
See, okay, so this is where I start to have issues with the show again, because everything like we've been talking about, there's been a few ha-has, whatever, but for Cory to throw a massive baby shower for Topanga, only for her now to publicly have to tell everyone at the shower, "I'm not pregnant, I'm just fat," is insane and humiliating to do, like, publicly for her. Like, this should have been like, hey, pull Cory aside, have a little private conversation, and have Cory take care of it. Be like, hey, I misheard. There was a rumor. It got out of hand. She doesn't need to say anything about her weight in front of all of these people. Like, I think it feels humiliating to her as a character.
I didn't think about that, but I think you are so right. I think it should have been Cory's responsibility to stand up in front of everyone and been like, I'm an idiot. I made an assumption. I owe you all an apology. Instead of making the person who, by the way, their biggest crime was that they ate pizza at the beginning of the episode. They have to now apologize for their husband's impulsivity.
And I feel like the way that they make Topanga like complicit in this is that moment when she's like, well, I like the gifts, I do like the DVD player, like all that stuff. At one point, like, Cory's petting her belly and she's petting the DVD player, and I'm like, this isn't even who Topanga is, though.
Thank you. I was like, and now she's materialistic. What are we doing? The character assassination of this character, it is ridiculous, because Topanga would not be this materialistic. Even the Topanga who we've come to know, who is no longer the flower child, the idea that she would be willing to do all of this, I was like, Topanga is no longer the moral center. Topanga used to be the moral one. And now we've given Eric more morality than we have Topanga. It's crazy.
One thing I will say, the one thing I do love about this party scene is, one, we finally meet Nana Boo Boo, who's been referenced throughout the show. Morgan wheels her in. And I actually love Ben's performance in this, where it's like, and she brought a check for $75,000. Like, he's so animated and he's so, like, excited. Like, Cory does everything you would want a guy to do who finds out that he's about to have a baby, but he just never had that conversation with her ahead of time to verify this. And now he's put her in an impossible situation.
Absolutely. I just wanted to, like, you said it. I was about to go into our roll call. We finally get to meet the famous Nana Boo Boo, who is played by Peggy Miley, who you know from several TV shows. She's in so many things. She's a very popular character actor, especially at this point in time. Also, I was like, so at that scene, Alan goes and says, hey, you've never given us any money. And she goes, I've never really liked you, which to me indicates that Nana Boo Boo is from Amy's side of the family.
Which
is interesting because, again, we never really get to know.
Is this Amy's mom? Is this who this is supposed to be? Like, I know that Cory has Nana Boo Boo and Grandpa Poppy. I think is like, he always had poppy seeds in his mouth, and that's why we called him Grandpa Poppy. Like, I know that these people exist, and I'm assuming they must both be Amy's parents, even though they never get treated like that.
We get to see Morgan again as well.
Morgan, who I completely forgot existed. Her hair's a little bit darker. She's clearly older, and I haven't seen her since the wedding episode, ?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really fun. As you said, like, I wanted to give Nana Boo Boo her, but she also, I want to say, she gives them a check for $75,000.
Also, it's one of those giant Happy Gilmore checks too. It's not even just a regular check.
And I want to point out that, do you know how much money that is in 2024?
Please tell me.
$75,000 in 2000 is the equivalent of $136,000 in 2024. Nana Boo Boo, what you doing?
Yeah, first of all, where'd you get that money from, Nana Boo Boo? And secondly, what's so funny is that at the time, Topanga's like, oh, we could buy a house. Even with the equivalent, if you got $200,000 today, you ain't buying no house. So
exactly, like, what are we doing? That's how Nana Boo Boo got that money. She's able to just invest in.
This is generational wealth.
That's that silent generation money.
This is white privilege at its best. Yeah, so obviously Topanga has to get to that point where she has to tell everyone she's not having a baby, but she, like, again, she publicly has to give one of those, like, you remember every time in Saved by the Bell when Zach Morris did something and he had to give, like, a speech to everyone in class apologizing? Like, it's one of those, like, classic sitcom, hey everyone, here's what's actually going on. And I'm like, this is a conversation with you and Cory.
Yeah, before we do that, what changes her mind is the idea that Cory gives this really impassioned speech about how nervous he was and how much he's looking
Yeah.
forward to being a father. And with all of that, Topanga finally comes to her senses and it's like, oh, I can't let this go on. Like, I was willing to do it for money. I was willing to do it for a DVD player,
Were
but
you like
yeah,
really,
this is what I'm saying.
Topanga?
She's willing to go along with the lie as long as she got material things. But it's lying to Cory, the person who didn't take 5 seconds to ask her
Yeah.
if she was pregnant or not, who still hasn't acknowledged her weight loss. All of these things, she can't hurt that person's feelings.
You know what? I'm so glad you said that because we kind of skipped over this, and I wanted to say that, like, that moment right before she walks in and Angela's like, "You're glowing, you're so beautiful." I felt so bad for Topanga in that moment. She's like, "Wow, like people are noticing my weight loss," and it's like, "No, we actually thought you were getting bigger." I was just like, "Damn, this girl cannot catch a break."
Exactly. This is so important, and it's so important. I don't know how to say it other than that. In realizing how the show treats Topanga now that she is pregnant, not that she's pregnant, how the show treats Topanga now that she is Cory's wife.
Yeah.
And we get these sitcom wife storylines and not this I'm a college student storylines.
Yeah, which is like what everyone else gets to have. Like Rachel and Jack and Eric, like a few episodes ago, talking about their futures and everything like that. Like it's this concentration on being a college student, but everything since the engagement has been about her becoming and being Mrs. Matthews. Like her
Correct.
identity has just kind of gone away in a way that's really sad because I'm like, where is it? Like, I don't know who this woman is anymore, honestly.
Absolutely. To that point, after you pointed out, Topanga gives her speech apologizing to everyone, saying that this was a misunderstanding. The fact that she gives that, I didn't even note it, but now that you've said it, I'm angry that I have to say Topanga gives this apology because it absolutely should be Cory. Also, really quickly, we talked about this earlier. I know for all of you who are going to say that it was a production thing or it was behind the scenes, I know the real life reason in story, why is this in the student union? We just had Feeney's wedding at the Matthews house. Y'all told me that the Matthews house was the go-to place to throw an event because we can throw Feeney's wedding there. But we have to have Topanga's baby shower in the student union.
Also, who are all these people? Like, who are all these people? When Amy had her baby shower, it was literally Amy and Topanga and all of her friends. Like, where are all these people coming from? Why can't this be at the Matthews house? Why can't this be somewhere else? It's like you just found a place where you can like cram as many strangers in there as possible to make this even more humiliating for her to be like, this is because she doesn't say I thought I was fat. She says I'm fat. That's why. And I'm just
absolutely.
like, wow.
And then we take a little moment to have an after school special where everyone gets to share their own insecurities. Rachel's like, I get insecure about being tall, which I will not shit on because I do know that is a real thing for women to have to go through.
She said she has 5'2" on her license.
Exactly.
That's literally Danielle's height.
Angela says that she would kill for those curves. And then we get, again, a little bit of negging on Shawn's part where he's like, yeah, and her feet are messed up. It's just like,
you got bunions. I'm like, all right. All right.
And then she's like, excuse you, don't be talking about my feet. He goes, what? I have no ass. And again, it's what are we doing? I'm watching this being like, what are we doing? By the way, who wrote all of these insecurities?
I would love to know.
Actor, here's the thing. This is why, like, people are always like, "Are you an actor?" I couldn't because if someone were to write an episode about how I had gained weight, or I had to say the thing, I ain't got no abs, I'm too tall, or whatever they would have want to say about me, I would not have been able to come out of it. This feels like, you know how kids are just brutally honest.
Yeah.
And people are like, I'm terrified of kids because if a child say it, it's true.
Yeah. It's Not okay, so that's true, but here's something else I thought about, and you can tell me if you can think of another example. I feel like the idea of bunions has only been given to black women. Like, I
I
never
was
feel
thinking
like
the same
white
thing.
women ever talk about having bunions or anything like that on television or media from us growing up. Maybe someone can find another example, but I can't think of it. So it felt a little racist to say Angela has bunions.
Not only that, and I don't know, I do not want to assign this to Erica, but it does feel like Erica wrote that line, or like it was something that was said. And the way I will also say, even with the line reading, Shawn is a little too comfortable being like, she got bunions. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Quick side note, when I was a kid, I didn't know the difference between bunions and funyuns, so I just thought they were talking about the chips until I was like 14 years old.
Some things you can keep to yourself. I just want everybody to know that.
Secrets
Some
exist,
things you could just keep to yourself. Yeah. I will say it is interesting that we get that moment. Everyone's listing their insecurities.
Well, Jack starts with saying, "Well, I'm perfect. I'm gonna double down. I'm perfect."
And then eventually exposes his own insecurities, said that people used to call him Jumbo Jack. Now, while I do not think that this is good that they have
Eric's reaction is
Eric's
perfect.
reacted, come in, it is true to who Eric is.
Yeah.
Eric has done this numerous times. And so I do think that that's great. And then, as you said, we kind of said it earlier, the fact that when Topanga goes, "Oh, I am fat," Eric said so. And Eric's like, "I only said that because I wanted your food. I actually think you're hot." Again, it's like all of this is in keeping with the type of character that Eric has become.
Can you imagine as a woman going through this journey only to find out that it was because someone wanted your pizza? Like there was no you went on a whole spiral because of what this one person said affirming this insecurity when it really had nothing to do with that. Like yeah, like it really kind of breaks up the bond that they built throughout the episode. One thing I also want to say is when he's like laughing about Jumbo Jack, Eric is doing this from a place of insecurities. He is this, we talked about this. This character is broken and hurt, and he can only be the jester at this point. So, really, like when he's laughing really loud at that, even at things he's done this before, at things that aren't necessarily funny, but he's just kind of burst out laughing. It makes us laugh because of the way he does it, but really it's coming from a place that if someone did that in real life, you would know it's coming from their own insecurities.
Well, not only that, but like to your point, this entire episode, I was like, again, we are just dunking on Eric.
Yeah.
Not only do we like tell Eric that he can't be the type of person he wants to be when he graduates college, and no one wants to be his friend, no one wants him on their side. But now this episode, we're like, and you're fat, and not only are you fat, but you understand that you're fat. You want food, and that's your comfort. And no one really goes to Eric and is like, Eric, by the way, you're not fat either.
Yeah. Like Eric, when Eric says that thing about like women dislike me for who I am, not for what I look like that's kind of also a sad realization that Eric believes that. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
Eric has the lowest self-esteem of anyone, yet that's not explored at all. It's all about Topanga's self-esteem issues. So
Correct.
Just interesting.
So, anything else you want to say about this episode?
Like you said, this is the after school special of it where Feeny finally comes in and says, like, unfortunately, we live in a society where everyone has really unrealistic expectations. So it almost feels like I don't know where the show is trying to do here because the show started this and then it's kind of like trying to save it as well. I don't know.
Pardon the pun, it wants to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Like that's what this episode wants.
It's like we want to call out like these actors for their appearance, but also we want to say that none of it matters.
Yeah, society. It's society. It's the media. As we, a television show, make fun of our actors for the last 20 minutes.
So yeah, that's kind of what it is. I do love that Cory is just like, hey, I love everything about you. That's never gonna change. Cory is the best I've seen Cory in a long time. And I thought it was funny that Nana Boo Boo asked for her check back. So
yeah, you better get that check back.
I'm
That's
taking that money.
$137,000 in today's money.
Even 75 in that time, like when 75 was worth more, because you could actually get a house for $75,000. Like it's just makes
She
me
gotta
wish there
go
was more
invest in
different time.
Bitcoin.
Yeah. Hopefully she bought some stocks.
Okay, you guys, let us know your thoughts on this episode because honestly, this is very, as I said, it was very personal to me. I just remembered it. I'm not gonna lie, they're very much like the title of this episode. She's having my baby back ribs. For those of you who don't remember, I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back, I want my baby back, baby back, baby
Barbecue
back, baby
sauce.
back. Yep, that was a hit at this point in time. It is a thing where it's like when I think of the title of this, it makes me laugh, but I think again about what we're talking about, and I have to reconsider. That's how I think about this episode in general. Did I laugh? Yes. Are the performances great? Yes. Are we doing things and having storylines that we and character dynamics that we haven't had in a while? Is this the last time we see everyone together? All of those things, yes. But the fact that we spend all of it talking about two characters' bodies,
Yeah.
and we only really justify the way that we've treated everyone one character's body. I want better for all of us.
I want better for all of us. This episode shows me that I enjoy a mix-up. I enjoy a confusion. I enjoy the way that all the casts played together in here. Again, the central core of the story, I think needs some tweaks. And if it would be one thing if they were like, hey, Danielle, Will, we're thinking about doing this. Do you guys have any like boundaries? Do you have any ideas? Do you want to contribute in any way? Any things you don't want us to cover? Like none of that was done. So it's really hard for me to just chalk this all up for the sake of comedy when I know that like you said, like two real people had their bodies analyzed for half an hour of television on national television.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you an exclusive news announcement, introducing the Bromance World podcast Patreon. Over to you, Ceej.
That's right, Tony. When you join our Patreon as a Gold Star member, you get to dive into ad-free listening for just $3 a month. That's $3 a month to enjoy commercial-free listening to our latest episodes.
Now, Ceej, does this mean our listeners get to immerse themselves in bonus content, including extended episodes, exclusive Pod Meets World reviews, and our coverage of My Date with the President's Daughter?
That's right, Tony. And snag a sweet discount on our awesome Bromance World merchandise. And join the conversation to our Patreon polls. Unlock a world of exclusive content at patreon.com/BromMeetsWorld. Back to you, Tony.
Thanks, Ceej. By becoming a patron, you're not just supporting the show, you're getting VIP access to content you won't find anywhere else. For just $3 a month, enjoy the luxury of ad-free listening and join an exclusive club where the fun never stops. Back to you, Ceej.
Thanks, Tony. Don't miss out on the action. Join us at Patreon today and get you some Tony and Ceej time. Your support means the world to us. That's patreon.com/BromMeetsWorld. Back to you, Tony.
Elevate yourself from a basic listener to an official member of the Brom Meets World family. Now, back to the episode.
Correct. That kind of leads us to our bruh moment. What is your bruh moment?
This whole damn episode.
Yep, that's what I was gonna say. That's it. The whole episode.
The whole episode. Like, it's just, there's no reason, especially for a woman, to have her body picked apart like this. Like, you have to understand, like, this was at a point where some people had cable and some people didn't. So like to air something on ABC, everyone's watching this. You know what I mean? Like I just, to go to a grocery store the day after this airs or something, like it's just, you feel like there's eyes on you. I would have to imagine it. Again, I don't want to assume anything on behalf of Will and Danielle. Like hopefully we'll get a conversation with them to talk about this more, but I just think this whole episode needs to be rethought from the ground up. Like there's some good parts, but we can save the good parts and rework it into something different.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is definitely one of those where I'm very interested to see what Pod has to think about this episode.
Absolutely.
I feel like they're gonna need a moment before they even dive into it. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the lesson of this episode? What is the Feeny lesson?
The Feeny lesson of this episode is, again, work on your communication. I feel like I've said this multiple times. I feel like that's the only thing to really take away from it. You could come with the Feeny, unrealistic expectations thing. Maybe that's the real lesson, but I think it should just be like, love yourself. Love yourself for who you are. Like the idea that Topanga finds gratification from outside influences, from her husband saying, I think you're beautiful. It's like, no, what does Topanga think she's beautiful? Like I really wish that would have been more of a focus. So
I love that. I'm only going to add to that, talk to your partner,
yeah.
like your actual married spouse, before you
Anytime
do
Cory has to talk to his
anything.
partner, he talks to Shawn.
Exactly. That's why I said spouse, because I had to rephrase it. Can't say loved one, can't say partner. No, go to your spouse, the person that you are legally married to.
And kind of going off of our idea of the multiverse, like last in the whole war and peace thing, Danielle was like, Topanga was like, I really thought I was part of you and Shawn's special team. Like, I guess I'll never get in the way of you and Shawn. And then in this episode, Cory again chooses to talk to Shawn over Topanga at every turn. So
Correct.
We're in a different timeline.
Absolutely. Okay. What grade are you giving it? This is good. What grade are you going to give it?
I'm giving this episode a C.
Okay. Yes, you and I both.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I'm giving it a C. I have to knock it down for the way that it handles the subject matter.
Yeah.
As great as it is to see everyone, as much as the Company of Errors really works, it actually is a little all over the place narratively.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I like a lot of what they do with Cory. I like a lot of what they have to say about the media and representation and expectations. I like the comedy. I think the acting is good. However, we don't really commit to a narrative on whether or not we feel one way or the other. We don't really show reasons for these characters to feel like they're not meeting expectations, other than at this particular time we've decided to make Jack a little bit more we've decided to make Jack a little more vain and pretend that Eric and Topanga are actually on my 600-pound life.
Yeah. It's not great.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move on to our homework. Tony, what do you have for homework?
I'll throw this out there. I saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
I did too.
Okay. I thought it was okay. I didn't love it as much as I loved the first three, but I did have fun with it. And I think that explored a lot of interesting themes about religion and about legend and about how societies, get built up and things like that. I just found really interesting. I thought visually it was a very beautiful movie, and I did enjoy the characters in it. But again, I didn't love it as much as I loved the Caesar trilogy. I think that's like a perfect trilogy. So I think this one comes close, but it's not quite there for me. But I still thought it was a fun time at the movies.
So I will say that I watched it as well, and I thought that it was visually great. I just recently did a marathon of all three, and so to see where we started with Rise of the Planet of the Apes and what the CGI looks like then to where we are now, I think a lot of the shots are really beautiful. The acting's really great. The comedy really hits. Like all of that is good. Very similarly, I'm like, but I gotta talk about this message. We gotta talk about the fact that Hollywood will tell all of the indigenous stories that it wants. It just doesn't want indigenous people. We'll do it with apes. We'll do it with aliens. We'll do it with cardboard trash if we needed to. But if it involves actually telling these stories from an indigenous perspective, starring indigenous peoples and brown people, that's where they draw the line. And that's how I felt about it. I watched this and I was like, I can't ignore that we are telling this story about what it feels like to be on your own land and have your own people be attacked and all of this other stuff, and what happens when white people come into the picture, and then say that we're willing to tell all these stories as long as the main character is not brown.
I will say that, one of the problems I did have with that movie, again, had a blast with it. People go see it. The fact that the one human that they have interaction with is a white woman, I was just like, no, this should have been an indigenous character. This should have been a black character. This should have
No,
been
it shouldn't have
anyone
been.
else.
You want to know why? Because I'm not going to give anything away, but her actions later on, I was like, yep, if anyone would, it would be a white woman. It would be a
all right.
white
You know
woman.
what? You're right.
I looked at this movie and I was like, they did one thing right, and that is never trust a white.
I can't dispute. No, but I had fun with it, and I encourage people to watch it because it's like I've seen a lot of movies. Like I saw Fall Guy, like I've seen a few like of the big movies coming out. But I actually did have a lot of fun with this, and I thought if nothing else, the conversations I wanted to have afterwards were fun to have. So.
Absolutely.
So, Ceej, what is your homework for this week?
So you talked about a movie that has just come out, but I want to talk about a movie that's been out for a while that I saw in theaters. I don't know when it's coming to streaming, but I actually watched Abigail.
Okay.
The movie Abigail. And that to me was a fun movie. Was it great? No, but this was like not great, but fun in a way that it was done by the team who did, I think they're called Radio Silence.
Mm-hmm.
And my one complaint with the movie is I wish the trailer didn't give so much away. This is 100%. One where I'm like, if I had watched it and I had just seen that something was going on with this girl and I didn't know that she was a vampire, I feel like it would have been so much better. But I still had fun, even with the twist, even where we were going. I thought it did a really good job. It was gory, yes. Y'all know how I feel about gore, but it also was like just a fun romp of a movie. And I was like, I could do more horror movies like this.
I also saw this movie. It's from the directors of the Scream 5, Scream 6, and Ready or Not. I don't know that this is the best movie of that bunch, Abigail. Like I feel like Ready or Not is probably the better one of all of them. Yes. However, I will say this. If you're watching this movie and you're just like, maybe you have a few drinks in you, it's a good time. I don't think the movie makes much sense in terms of like why this is all happening. However, if you just want to see some like cool visuals and just have like a fun night at the movies, I think you're right. I think that could be the movie for you.
You know who stars in both that I'm really into right now?
Who's that?
Y'all know how I feel about a himbo. Kevin Durand. Kevin Durand is both in Abigail and The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And he does a good job in both. And I was like, I'm kind of like looking forward to seeing where your career goes because he's been a character actor. He's good and he's in a lot of things. But watching him in Abigail, I was like, what you up to? I kind of like you. I like what I'm doing.
It's so funny that you bring that up because I didn't think much of him when I saw Abigail, but then I saw his performance in Planet of the Apes, which I actually think his character is probably one of the more charismatic of all the new characters. Yeah. And he did such a great job that I was like, holy shit, this is the dude from Abigail. Like he is really having a run right now. And so, yeah, I'm also excited to see what he does next.
For those who are interested, he is 6'6" as well. So just putting that out there. Just putting that out there.
6'6", 50 years old, looks young, like he's
looking good. He seems to me to like his star is on the rise. I'm not saying that like I expect him to be like the next Brad Pitt, but I can definitely see his career kind of doing what is his name? Shit.
Dude, now, I'm just scrolling through this dude's IMDb right now. He's been in the business a long time. Yeah, I had no idea he was in Austin Powers, Spy Who Shagged Me. He was in Scooby-Doo 2. He was in Big Mama's House. Like, he's been in things where I was just like, wait, I need to go back and look for this dude. Like, I wasn't paying attention to him before, but maybe I should have been.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He is definitely one of those, who's that guy?
Yeah, who's that guy?
Once you see him, I feel like his star's on the rise, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. So Definitely. All right, you guys, if you have any recommendations, please let us know at brummeetsworld@gmail.com or at brummeetsworld on all the social platforms. Check out our YouTube at brummeetsworld podcast, and also you guys know we got merch. We got a Patreon. Go check out that Patreon. Check out that merch. Give us your feedback. We're still doing our Podme World Reacts. So go on to our Patreon and check those out. And as we said, these are the final 7. So make sure that you come back as we hit next week's episode. We're getting down to the clock, and we're really excited to take that journey with you guys.
Absolutely. Is there something else we should remind everyone?
I think we should remind them to dream.
Well, if you're going to dream, you should try.
And if you're going to try, you should eat pizza.
In one single bite.
Do good, you guys.
Do good. Later, bros.
Later, bro.
This episode of Bromance World was produced by Ceej and edited by Tony Curtis. Bromance World's a 2 Free Tokens Media Productions.
Bye.
When the spawn meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, 2 best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.